When the property manager finally learnt that I was moving on, something interesting happened. The people who weren't returning my calls, who hadn't responded to the concerns that I'd raised, who didn't get back to me when I escalated to people who were in charge, suddenly found the time to contact me. And they were surprised about the fact that I was leaving. And I want to be very clear, I made sure they understood that they had absolutely nothing to be surprised about. Today, I want to tell you the full story, something that I raised a couple of episodes ago about why I fired my residential property manager, someone who I'd been with for 7 years. And more importantly, I want to share with you what it means for you and the clients inside your commercial real estate business. This is episode 269 of Commercial Real Estate Leadership. My name's Darren Krakowiak. I'm here to help you lead better, grow faster, and stress less. And just a couple of episodes ago, we spoke about the opportunity to be prepared for an unexpected absence in your business. And I want to give you a pro tip right now of a way that you can perhaps avoid having to have an unexpected absence from your business, and that is by going out and getting your flu shot, which I'm going to do this afternoon. Maybe if I was telling you tomorrow, I wouldn't be telling you to do it because it's probably got to be a nasty jab. But one of my clients just told me that they have been out all week with influenza A because, well, their flu shot was due to happen for the whole business. So, he's very prepared, but that's in a couple of weeks' time. But it got him before he actually had his jab. So if you haven't had your flu shot, which I do sometimes, but I don't always do, that was all the motivation I needed when he told me his condition and the fact that he'd been knocked out for the whole week. Go and get your flu jab. And that's something that you can encourage your whole team to do as well. One little other bit of housekeeping. I do want to say thank you to one of my most loyal listeners, Rod. Rod, thank you for your support and for the shout out on your Instagram company page. What happened was they did a reel about all the different podcasts that people in the office listened to, and people were talking about stuff like Diary of a CEO, and then Rod pops up and says, I listened to Commercial Real Estate Leadership with Darren Krakowiak, and I thought, what a great shout out amongst some of the best podcasts going around right now. So Rod, I really appreciate your shout out and your support, so thank you. All right, so let's talk about what happened with my residential property manager, and I want to say something at the front. I am not a difficult client. Okay. In fact, if anything, I am very aware of the fact that people who work in property management have a difficult job, and I work in the industry. So therefore, I want to do my best to be a good client. And I was a good client with this property management firm, with this real estate agency for many, many years. I bought a property in 2019 in the sort of inner middle northern suburbs of Melbourne. It had been with one owner for the whole sort of since probably the 1950s. He sold the property to me, and I eventually ended up knocking it over. And with my Korea money, that is money I made in Korea, I developed 3 townhouses on this property, which I still own. So it's a good news story, and it was a good news story for them as well because I was loyal to them. One thing they did really, really well when COVID started, they found me a tenant, and it was a short-term lease because I couldn't do a year lease because I had plans to demolish the property. So I was so grateful to this agency for the work that they had done. And I was very happy to be loyal with them. And they then leased the properties for me, and they've re-leased them again. One of the tenants has been in there the whole time, but a couple of others have turned over. And I wanted you to know this about this story because by the time that I had left them, they had every opportunity to fix what I felt was broken. And I didn't leave lightly. It wasn't a snap decision. Before I tell you what went wrong, I want to give you a bit of a framework around how you might be able to spot the same problem in your business, right? And I want to call this the Loyalty Erosion Curve because what happened to me didn't happen overnight. It happened in, I think, probably 5 distinct stages. And I've seen this or some version of this pattern play out in commercial real estate agencies that lose clients that they never saw coming. But the truth is that you can see it coming if you know what to look for. So the first stage is confidence, right? The relationship is strong. Both sides assume it will continue and loyalty feels mutual and it's very stable. The second stage is where friction appears, right? Small service gaps start to come up and the client at this stage probably absorbs them. They don't really complain. They give the benefit of the doubt. The third stage is concern. And This is where the client actually raises an issue. And I had raised issues in relation to, I wasn't happy with the leasing on one particular townhouse after a tenant moved out. It hadn't leased in a couple of weeks at a period when vacancy was very low, and they hadn't contacted me to sort of give me some advice on maybe adjusting the price. And I said, I think it's time to adjust the price. And I would have expected you to be proactive on that, given that we're not getting any bites in what should be a very easy to lease market right now. There are also some maintenance issues. General communication was a problem. And they also missed a couple of rental increases, like the annual rental increase that in a rising rental market should have been flagged. They just didn't flag it. And I was the one who was going, hey, it's been 14, 15 months since we increased the rent. Shouldn't we be doing that? So, this is the stage, I think, when concerns are being raised by the client, and it's where the relationship can be saved or it can be lost. And a lot of agencies just miss the opportunity to save it, because what we don't want to get to is stage 4, when the client starts to disengage. So the client stops expecting good service. They stop expecting a resolution. They've actually begun, probably quietly and on their own, evaluating alternatives, but they don't really tell you, but the decision is forming in their mind about what they should do next. And stage 5 is when they exit, right? The decision is made, and then you find out that they're leaving. And that's not really the decision, because the decision was already made in their mind. That's just when you learn about it. So here's the hard truth. Most agencies only find out a client is leaving once they're at stage 5. And by then, there's pretty much nothing you can do about it, because I know when I was at stage 5, I had already signed the authority with the other agency. The only stage where intervention really works is stage 3. And that's when a client raises a concern and you have an opportunity to respond. So back to my story, like I said, came on board as a client with them in 2019. And, for years, everything was fine. I was a good client. They were a good service provider. I had an excellent property manager. I wasn't really monitoring them closely. I had good trust in this property manager. And then she left, though. And she was a good property person. Her husband worked at the REIV. And I was a bit disappointed when she left. But I also recognized staff turnover happens. Maybe I had a unicorn in terms of a really good property manager. But I did notice some changes in the quality of communication, and the responsiveness that I would usually have expected wasn't there anymore. And when some of the issues that I spoke about before in relation to leasing and maintenance and communication and being proactive with annual rental increases, and remember, I've got 3 townhouses with this residential property manager in Middle Melbourne. So I think that if you've got 3 properties with them, then you're probably like, and again, I don't want to say I was a difficult client. I never ever expected the VIP treatment, but I would have thought that maybe I was a little bit important to them. So I raised some concerns, and I raised them more than once. And this is the stage that if you're a commercial real estate principal, I want you to pay close attention to, because what happened next is exactly what you must never let happen in your business. I escalated to the principal. I contacted the officer in effective control. I called him and I emailed him, and he never got back to me. That was the moment, right? I probably didn't know it at the time, because then I emailed somebody else, and then somebody did get back to me and they offered some sort of resolution to the situation that I was dealing with at the time. But that was the moment when I started thinking, these guys don't really give a crap about me and my business, right? And it wasn't about the fact that that problem wasn't solved. It was about the fact that the person who was responsible didn't think that my concern was worth a phone call. So I've probably got then to the disengagement stage. The change of ownership probably compounded it. So one thing that happened in this firm was there was a change in ownership and also a change in branding while I was a client. And I noticed that I guess was when things started to get worse in terms of what I noticed. And it's funny, because that could have been a real opportunity for them to re-engage with their existing clients, to reset relationships. But what it did was it actually accelerated the deterioration. So I wasn't being won over. I felt like I was being taken for granted. I stopped expecting things to improve, and I stopped actually being annoyed by the things that weren't being done to my satisfaction. I wasn't actively looking for alternatives, but I was certainly open to it. And what actually happened, and the reason why I left, was because some upstart residential real estate firm prospected me out of the blue. And they called me and I looked them up and I said, okay, they've got about 50 properties. They seem to know what they're doing. They've got a proper presence online. I thought, what the hell, I'll give them a go. Can they be worse than this other mob that I've been with that I'm not happy with? So, by the time they contacted me, the decision in my mind to move on was made, and it was a very easy conversion for them. So, a lot of lessons or takeaways from that particular point. But one thing that I didn't do was I never actually called my existing property manager to tell them that I was thinking of leaving. I just signed the authority with the new agency, and then they found out by the new property manager contacting them to say that, hey, I was moving on. And I didn't think they really deserved the courtesy from me to give them a heads up. But once they got the notification, you better believe that they were on to me very quick. And of course, once they learnt that I was leaving, they became very responsive. There was suddenly urgency. There was suddenly concern. And, to be fair, maybe it was genuine, but it was just too late, right? The first person who called me was someone who I'd never spoken before. And then one of the agents who I'd had some dealings with when I purchased the property called me, but I didn't really know him very well. But on both occasions, I made it very clear that there is nothing for them to be surprised about. That people in the business knew that I wasn't happy and they didn't address my concerns, right? The signals had been there, the concerns had been raised, and the escalation had been ignored. So what they were experiencing, perhaps as a surprise, was actually the accumulated consequence of a series of decisions or non-decisions that they had made. So I think the point for you is, if a client calls you to tell you that they're leaving and your instinct is, oh, that's a surprise, that means that there might be a gap in how you perceive your business operates and the reality of what your clients are experiencing. So I just want to draw out a couple of implications for you. Number one, loyalty isn't security, okay? So long tenured clients feel like they're not going anywhere, but they may just be patient, okay? The longer that they've stayed, particularly if you've got gaps in your service delivery, the more capital that you've spent and the more damage that one unresolved issue can do. The second thing to point out is that your clients are often loyal to a person, not to your brand. Now, they might be loyal to you personally, or they might be loyal to someone on your team. And when it's to someone on your team, you've got to have a protocol for when that person leaves. How do you ensure that the experience that your clients have been getting from that person continues once they've left? And if they are loyal to you and you decide you want to be less involved in the business, how can you ensure that they get to experience the level of service that they've come to expect from you, but delivered through your team? You've got to have a plan to deal with this when people do leave, because otherwise you're at risk of losing clients every time one of your staff do leave. So we want to have a business that's based on systems and processes rather than that's based on the personalities within it. And the last point I want to make is that the escalation moment is an opportunity to fix things. Okay, so when a client raises a concern, especially when they escalate past your frontline team and they come to you, don't treat it as a nuisance. Treat it as a stage 3 moment in those 5 stages that I ran through before. This is your last real opportunity to keep them, to show them that you actually care about them as a client. If you miss that, you are in effect making the decision to let them leave. So I wasn't a difficult client. I know maybe I'm coming across as a little bit precious right now, but I really wasn't. I was loyal. And, loyal clients don't really leave loudly. They just leave quietly after they've sort of, given you more chances than perhaps you deserve. So the question that I would like to leave you with after this episode is, think about the last client that your business lost, one that maybe surprised you. Now, walk backwards through that loyalty erosion curve that I took you through earlier in this episode. And what stage do you think you could have intervened? And what stopped you from doing that? If you want to map through your current key client relationships against this framework, that's exactly the type of work I do with commercial real estate principles inside CRE Success. You can send me a DM on LinkedIn and we can find a time to chat. That is our episode for today. Thank you so much for listening, and I will speak to you soon.